Jung and Neumann form a somewhat unusual couple of close colleagues. Their story begins, more or less, with Erich Neumann, 30 years the younger than his newly found mentor, writing him furiously about Jung playing into the hands of the Nazis, being, to say the least, naive, forcing Jung to defend himself vigorously. And it ends a quarter of a century later, when Jung writes to Shalit, Neumann's widow, that Erich was his companion on the road. In fact, Jung once said that he had two friends, Victor White in England and Erich Neumann in Israel. Erich Neumann was the ever outsider, stirring anger and envy in the Zurich group around Jung. He had his own views and did not play it politically correct or according to the rules of the Zurich group. That's also why Neumann found much more of a spiritual and intellectual home at Erel than at the Zurich Institute. And that's probably why Jung liked him. He posed a challenge. He didn't take anything for granted and was able to be a partner in dialogue and not merely a yes man. While both of them were steeped in German literature and philosophy, Romanticism and Enlightenment, they carried their different cultural heritages and were each closely connected to their ancestry, Jung as a Christian, Neumann as a Jew. But Neumann's Jewishness, while secular and certainly not religious in any conventional sense, was completely different from Freud's. Freud had said about himself that he's very much a Jew, but didn't know what about him actually was Jewish. He even said that science might one day be able to determine what in him is Jewish. With Neumann, that was very different, and he found a brilliant way to combine his Jewish way of thinking, based, I believe, not a little bit on the Midrashic way of interpreting and reinterpreting, and thus enlivening the ancient scriptures with Jung's archetypal psychology. This, by the way, is very clearly expressed in Neumann's very first book, Jacob and Esau, which has only now been published and which I have had the privilege of introducing and editing. I will present some aspects of this at the symposium. So Jung and Neumann could meet in dialogue, coming from their respective cultural heritages. Their discussions, much of it in writing, went far beyond the clinical. They would discuss issues of psyche, culture, and a God image, all which will be brought to the foreground at the symposium. Neumann is, of course, well known for his works on the feminine, the Great Mother, Fear of the Feminine, and so on, as well as his work on creativity, which will be presented by Mary Stein at the symposium. Also, his work on the Earth archetype precedes modern eco-psychology. Much of this will be raised by the lecturers at the symposium and discussed by and with the attendees at what promises to be quite a unique event, which I am excited to chair.